What's going on, everyone? Jon Venus here. Welcome back to another video. Today I have an exciting topic for you guys. I want to talk to you guys about the GameChangers, which is a documentary that is on Netflix right now. Seems to be the thing that everyone is talking about. I have to say that I am personally a fan of Joe Rogan. I think what he's done in terms of the podcasting space is revolutionary. So the first episode Joe Rogan made about the GameChangers was with Chris Kresser, a nutrition expert. They were basically just confirming their own beliefs by giving their opinions, and the audience, obviously because it's a mainstream audience of people who don't really know anything about nutrition and health, they just ate it up and thought that the GameChangers was officially debunked. I started getting a lot of messages about it.
Do you think that they're making these films because they believe what they're saying, or do you think they're making these films because they are trying to convert people to being vegan, and they think that distorting reality and just bending things and cherry picking data is acceptable?
Joe Rogan, being the open-minded guy that he is, had James Wilks, one of the producers, the main guy behind the film, on his podcast to debate Chris Kresser. I think that Chris Kresser personally didn't believe that James Wilks was gonna be much of a challenge in a debate, and that is maybe why he accepted it.
No, I think they believe it. I think people James, for example, I think he's genuinely trying to help people. I think he's looked at the data and he just came to a different conclusion.
But either way, it's awesome that he was in there, because at the end of the day, if you're gonna debunk and criticize something, it is only fair for the other side to come in and refute the claims that you made, right? And that is what James Wilks did in style, with so much facts, proof, and science behind his claims. So after watching this 3-hour and 45-minute massacre, I just went to the comment section just to see how the mainstream, how the people are reacting to this. And surprisingly enough, all the comments were not about the science, not about the claims being made. It was all about plant-based cocaine. And that just shows how much of a problem it is that people just don't want to listen to something that goes against their own personal views. And this comment that I found sums this up pretty well. I love how some of these comments try to defend Chris's feelings and how James was being rough on him, yet they completely ignore all of the lies and misinformation that Chris was spewing. It's not about your precious opinions, it's about seeking the full truth and aligning your views with reality. So I completely agree with this comment. I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that people are making in the health and nutrition space, is just trusting a single expert like Chris Kresser or anyone else, instead of looking at the totality of the evidence that we have available, all the literature. And expert opinion, as we know, is at the very bottom of the hierarchy of evidence. The higher up on the pyramid, the more reliable the evidence. So the first thing that I noticed was that Joe Rogan really stepped back and allowed James Wilks to speak freely, and maybe even too much sometimes, which allowed James Wilks to address everything that Chris Kresser said in the original debunk and counteract all of his arguments. I mean, there wasn't a single argument that Chris Kresser made that James couldn't debunk with ease. So I think Joe was really surprised by the official accreditations that this film had.
Your film is being evaluated by
the Defense Health Agency of the Department of Defense, which decides what the military is eating. They don't give a crap about, let's base our diets on evolution. They care on what is the science. And the GameChangers is the first documentary that's ever been accredited by the Defense Health Agency.
So one of the things that Chris Kresser was really focusing really hard on and trying to bring this point home to his side was the fact that the GameChangers was suggesting that dairy could potentially be problematic, and saying that the evidence is not strong enough to suggest that dairy could be a problem for causing cancer.
But this prostate cancer thing is not most.
But why
this is 50-50, right?
I know, but why
50-50 is disturbing.
So imagine what you're saying. You're saying if half of the if dairy gives half people cancer,
right,
and doesn't give the other half cancer, then I can just drink dairy.
So Chris, in the original debunk, was making a strong case for meat by using a heavily influenced and industry-funded study that came out recently. So James Wilks was quick to point out that the study that Chris used to promote meat was industry-funded, and how the tobacco and big pharma and the sugar industry uses the same tactic to push their products out there and confuse the public.
So they did a meta-analysis saying that don't worry about your intake of sugar at all. That was what their meta-analysis conclusion it came to. And then 2 years later, the day before the film comes out, they release a paper exonerating red meat and cancer. And the same study. So if you're going to buy into the Nutri-Rex study about red meat and cancer, then to be fair, you've also got to buy into their conclusions about sugar. You are the one that quoted this study. It shows that your finger's not on the pulse because hundreds of like top scientists have written letters or joined in the same letter to the Annals of Internal Medicine asking for those studies to be retracted. And there's now an investigation into the Annals of Internal Medicine, yet you are citing that study.
He said that he's not an expert. He points out that Chris is not an expert. And he says that we have to look at the totality of the evidence, the totality of the science, and look at what it's pointing to. And again, he shows clearly that Chris's own definitions of low carb, moderate carb and high carb intakes is completely different from the scientific consensus.
Moderate carb, according to Chris, next slide, Jamie, would be 15 to 30. Peer-reviewed literature, next slide, 40 to 65. And then high carb, Chris calls more than 30%. And the peer-reviewed literature, high carb, more than 65.
And I think Joe was a little concerned about that too.
You did have a different definition than the peer-reviewed literature.
Slide 88.
So you do,
slide 88.
By his definition, have your own idea.
And he said no.
High carb
You heard him say that. You heard him say no.
Yes.
Then basically they went on a huge discussion about B12 and how Chris mentioned in the original debunk that B12 supplementation was not given to farm animals, etc.
So first of all, there's the reference. You claimed you didn't have a reference. Would you admit that you were wrong?
I missed that.
Okay, 3 times wrong about B12. Okay, so can we just go into your study, your ebook on B12? You basically said, I don't know where you got that study from. Your B12 ebook opens with the exact same study. So can you put up slide 51, please, Jamie? Okay, is that your ebook on the left?
Yes.
So after an eternity on B12, James Wilks moved on to protein, quality, and quantity. And Chris, in the original debunk, made the claim that plant-based protein is less bioavailable. It's not as good as animal-based protein.
There's only at most like 2 or 3% different in digestibility of plant protein. And you know how it's assessed in the pigs? They give them raw food. So they give raw beans, raw grains. And you have said one of the reasons that it's less digestible is because of trypsin inhibitors.
Yeah.
What happens when you cook?
You would definitely break them down.
Are you getting it? So when you heat food, the likelihood is, even though it hasn't been tested, we know that the digestibility is less in plants by a few percent. Only a few percent, not the 40% versus 100% that he was claiming last time. That's old science. I'm talking about current science, right? And there's only a few percent difference. And they imagine that not only if you heated it, that you would get equivalent, you might even get more because you're killing the trypsin inhibitors by heating it.
Now, if you're vegan and you go to the gym, you know it's not a problem at all to build optimal amounts of muscle. It's never been a problem for me. I've been doing this for 5 years. I know so many others who have done it as well. The further along we came into the episode, the more and more confident James became in his knowledge and the less confident Chris became. He was just crossing his arms all the time. And Joe was really fascinated and impressed by James's knowledge. And Joe even asked Chris a question that I think, may have hurt their relationship.
What does that specifically mean, like master's level training in nutrition?
Right, thank you, Joe.
Well, in California, acupuncturists have a 4-year master's program, which includes a lot of medical sciences and nutrition, research methodology, etc.
And then at the end of the episode, James Wilks again brings a very important point home, which is that Chris Kresser is not following the scientific consensus. He's not taking into account the totality of the evidence and the science that we have available today. He's making up his own recommendations and just regurgitating stuff and articles from other people, other experts who again are at the bottom of the hierarchy of evidence.
Well, based on what you presented, you haven't lost an argument yet. There's not one thing that you've said that's incorrect.
So yeah, guys, I'm super happy that this podcast happened. I mean, this podcast is the biggest podcast in the world. It gets millions and millions of downloads and views per episode. So this is really important stuff. Like, even though people are people and they're just gonna listen for like 5 minutes and say, oh, he's just too aggressive, I can't listen anymore. I still think that for those who are willing to listen and be open-minded, I think that this could be a very educational video to watch or a podcast to listen to, because it really shows how misleading someone's opinion can be compared to the actual, harder evidence that is a lot closer to the truth, right? And I just love how Joe Rogan kind of seemed like he got a couple of realizations in there as well. And I really like the dude. I think he did an amazing job having James on to talk to Chris, to refute all of the claims that were being made on the debunking. So yeah, big shout out to Joe Rogan, big shout out to Chris Kresser for having the courage, which it requires a lot of courage to do this. Anyways, I'd really love to know your opinion on how you think that debate on the Joe Rogan podcast went in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new around here. Like, comment, all the good stuff, and I'll see you very soon. Peace out.
James, we'll have you on if you really want to do this. And
he's game.
Okay.
Yeah,
after this breakdown, I wonder how game he's still going to be.
Yeah, I wonder how game I'm going to be.